Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really pulling back the curtain on a company that has truly reshaped our world. Picture this. Jensen Huang, the CEO of Nvidia, marker in hand, just meticulously diagramming these incredibly complex ideas on a whiteboard. His colleagues, they actually call him Professor Jensen. Apparently, he has this amazing knack for breaking down the most complicated stuff into these precise sketches, almost like schematics. Makes them understandable to, well, anyone in the room. This image, right, this relentless focus at the whiteboard, it's more than just a picture. It's really a symbol, kind of a cornerstone of NVIDIA's absolutely unique culture. So our mission today is to unpack what's called the Nvidia Way. We're going deep into how this company, which, let's be honest, for years was mainly known by hardcore gamers wanting the best graphics for games like, say, Quake, how they transformed themselves into this AI giant.
I mean, they even briefly became the world's most valuable company back in June 2024. This whole evolution, from those early graphics chips to these advanced processors just perfectly suited for AI workloads, it's astonishing. It's all thanks to their unparalleled ability to perform massive mathematical calculations simultaneously. And that simultaneous processing, that's precisely what you need for training and running those huge advanced AI models we hear so much about these days. I mean, get this, on June 18th, 2024, NVIDIA's market cap soared past Microsoft, hitting an incredible $3.3 trillion. And for the early investors, wow, the returns are almost unbelievable. Since their IPO back in early '99, NVIDIA has delivered the highest annualized compound return for any U.S. stock in history. We're talking a compound annual growth rate over 33%. Just to put that in perspective for you, if you'd invested, say, just $10,000 when they first went public, that investment would have ballooned to something like $13.2 million by the end of 2023. Just incredible. Okay, so let's really unpack this.
How did a company that Jensen himself apparently doesn't love talking about its past, and it's a past filled with near-death experiences, strategic missteps, moments where they almost went bust, how did they achieve such unprecedented, almost unbelievable success? Many might just say, oh, it was luck or just sheer tech genius. But you frame this quite differently, more as a profound case study in leadership and corporate design. What are maybe one or two of the most, let's say, counterintuitive aspects of the Nvidia Way that really set them apart?
That's a great question, and it really gets to the heart of it for our listeners. What's truly fascinating here, is that this isn't just a story about technological innovation. It really is a profound case study in leadership and corporate design. It wasn't just about having better tech, though obviously that helped, right? The core of NVIDIA's success, their enduring success, it really lies in what people call the Nvidia Way.
Yeah.
It's this unique organizational design, this work culture that somehow combines an unusual amount of independence for employees with incredibly high standards. They demand maximum speed, but also maximum quality simultaneously. It's a culture that also breeds remarkable mental resilience, and that's a trait Jensen Huang himself really embodies and frankly enforces throughout the whole organization. So for you listening, the takeaway here is that culture, it's not just some soft skill, it's actually a hard competitive advantage.
Culture as a competitive advantage. I like that. That's powerful. And this deep dive, it really is for you. Whether you're, deep in the tech industry, fascinated by business strategy, or maybe you're just curious about how this kind of groundbreaking success is actually built. We're going to pull back that curtain today on the full story of NVIDIA's founding. And it's remarkable and often pretty tumultuous evolution.
The genesis of a giant Jensen's roots and NVIDIA's birth.
Okay, so to really understand NVIDIA, you've got to start at the beginning. With the man himself, Jensen Huang. His formative years, by his own account, were marked by what he calls pain and suffering, experiences that, deeply shaped his character and his leadership style later on. He was born in Taiwan, 1963. His parents had this profound dream for America, a dream that meant huge sacrifices. His mother, for instance, she diligently taught her two boys English every single day, using a dictionary, picking out 10 random words for them to spell and memorize. Imagine that.
Oh, absolutely. And their journey, it was definitely full of challenges. After some time in Thailand, Jensen and his older brother were sent over to Tacoma, Washington to live with an aunt and uncle. Jensen remembers them being difficult to handle, eating all the candy, jumping off roofs, just a couple of, let's say, spirited boys. But the most formative part of his early life, it took this really unexpected turn. His parents, they were still in Thailand, right? And they wanted to send the boys to a good American boarding school. They sold almost everything they owned to afford tuition for this place called Oneida Baptist Institute in eastern Kentucky. What they didn't realize, though, is that Oneida wasn't a prep school. It was actually a reform school for troubled kids, founded way back in the 1890s to, get this, quell feuding families.
A reform school? Wow. Not quite the prep school experience they were hoping for, huh?
Okay.
That's a huge twist. So how do you think that kind of immersion in such a, tough environment, how did that shape his leadership style differently than maybe a more conventional path would have?
Oh, it was absolutely pivotal. Yeah. At Oneida, Jensen found himself in this really strict routine. Had to cross the Redbird River every day for classes. He joined the swim team, played soccer, and even befriended his roommate. And this roommate sounds like quite a character intimidating guy, 8 years older, covered in tattoos, stab scars. But Jensen taught him to read. And in return, the roommate introduced him to weightlifting. Jensen says that gave him not just physical strength, but immense confidence. This whole period, he reflected later, it forged his tough street fighter mentality. He actually said, "I will never start a fight, but I will never walk away from one." That quote, it just perfectly captures that deep resilience born from adversity. He later said that resilience was way more important than just, intelligence for achieving greatness.
You can absolutely see how that mentality, that toughness, would just become ingrained in him. So after Oneida, Jensen joins his parents, who had moved to Beaverton, Oregon. He went to Aloha High School there. But his work ethic, those early lessons, they started even earlier and just kept going. He was scrubbing floors at the Paddle Palace, a local table tennis club. And not only did he discover he was good at it, he was praised in Sports Illustrated as the most promising junior, but he actually earned his own travel money for tournaments doing that. Then, at just 15, his brother helped him get a job at a Denny's in Portland.
Yep, Denny's. Started with the really dirty work, washing dishes, cleaning bathrooms. He claims he did more bathrooms than any CEO in the history of CEOs. Probably true. He moved up, became a busboy, then a waiter. Proudly declared, "I'm certain I was the best dishwasher, busboy, and waiter they've ever had." But get this, he absolutely hated making milkshakes. Found them too time-consuming, messy. He'd try to steer customers toward Coke, or if they really insisted on a shaky desk, "Are you sure?" And this small detail, it actually taught him a fundamental lesson about the trade-off between having high standards and being efficient. It's an early lesson that, kind of foreshadows Nvidia's later chip development, where balancing those ambitious features with practical efficiency became absolutely crucial. It just shows how these early, sometimes seemingly mundane experiences can really lay the groundwork for a CEO's core philosophy.
Yeah, it's fascinating. From scrubbing floors and avoiding milkshakes, Jensen's passion for tech really started to bloom. At Aloha High School, apparently, he spent every free moment programming BASIC on an Apple II, playing games like the old Star Trek mainframe game on teletype terminals. Loved arcade classics, too, like Asteroid, Centipede, Galaxian. He was clearly bright, skipped grades, graduated high school at 16. Then he went off to Oregon State University. That's where he met his future wife, Lori Mills, in an electrical engineering class. But, even future tech titans face rejection. He kept applying for an internship at a local tech company, Tektronic Industries, and got rejected every single time.
Persistence, right. Even with those rejections, it's just a constant theme with him. After graduating in '84, he got offers from AMD, Advanced Micro Devices, a company he really idolized, and LSI Logic, which made customizable microchips. He chose AMD. Spent his days designing microchips manually while doing his master's in electrical engineering at Stanford at night, and on weekends. Took him 8 years. 8 years juggling work studies, raising 2 kids, Spencer and Madison. He reflected on it, saying, "I have a very long-term horizon. I can be impatient about certain things, but infinitely patient about others. I plug away." And that ability to just plug away for the long haul, that turned out to be absolutely critical for Nvidia, especially in those really lean early years.
Right, but even after achieving what, many would see as the immigrant's dream, Jensen wasn't satisfied. His ambition just kept pushing him. He found manual chip design tedious. He was drawn to LSI Logic, where these new software tools promised faster, easier chip design. So he took a risk, joined LSI, started working with customers, and that led him to Sun Microsystems, where he met 2 engineers, Priem and Chris Malachowsky. They were working on this secret project aiming to revolutionize workstations. Jensen credits his rise not just to talent, but to his willingness to put in more effort and tolerate more suffering than anyone else. His advice for success: "I wish upon you ample doses of pain and suffering." That's a pretty stark philosophy, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And it really defines his character. And here's where it gets, really interesting. This confluence of talent that would eventually become Nvidia. Let's talk about Priem for a second. Taught himself programming as a teenager back in Ohio. Wrote a prize-winning billiards game on a teletype terminal hooked up to a mainframe. He even learned to digitize images by hand, creating his first computer graphics program to scale and rotate a digitized photo of his math teacher. Pretty cool stuff for a kid.
Yeah.
His passion led him to RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, specifically because they had this advanced IBM 3033 mainframe he wanted to work with.
Priem's journey, wow, was impressive. He hand-built his own computer at RPI, immersed himself in that huge IBM mainframe. When his dad lost his job, he joined a GM work experience program. Get this, he was programming machines that made Pontiac Fiero body panels. After graduating in '82, he was inspired by Apple's blockbuster IPO, saw the potential in personal computers, graphics chips, turned down a GM scholarship to join a hardware startup called Vermont Microsystems. And there, at just 23, he designed the IBM Professional Graphics Controller, the PGC, practically overnight. That was a huge leap in PC graphics for its time, really pushing the envelope.
Yeah, but despite that pivotal role, Vermont Microsystems offered him 0 stock options. And that's critical, right, for startup talent looking to build equity. Priem realized, okay, I'm not going to become the next Steve Jobs here. So off to Silicon Valley he went. Briefly joined a company called Genrad, which was apparently in crisis, before a headhunter led him to Sun Microsystems. And there, Wayne Rosing, who'd apparently envied Priem's PGC before, was looking for someone to design powerful graphics chips. Rosing asked him, could you make a graphics card like the PGC at Sun? Priem's answer, just a simple, definitive yes. That willingness, to take on big challenges and just deliver, it's a recurring theme with these guys.
Okay, now let's bring in Chris Malachowsky, often called Build-It Guy. His path is pretty unique, too. He actually started out pre-med at the University of Florida. But during a lunch break from taking his MCAT exam, he has this epiphany. Lying on a picnic table, realizes, I don't want to be a doctor anymore. His parents' reaction, surprisingly supportive. His mom said, good, you never read directions anyway. We didn't think you'd be a good one. Ouch, but maybe fair. So Malachowsky switched to electrical engineering. That led him to Hewlett-Packard, HP, in their manufacturing department.
And that hands-on experience at HP was absolutely crucial. It taught him, in his words, how real computers were built. See, lots of people could design a chip, but very few really understood how to manufacture it profitably in large volumes. He got that practical insight. Learned to design chips that weren't just functional, but actually manufacturable. After getting his master's in computer science, he took a practice interview at Sun Microsystems for some kind of graphics position. And that's where he met Curtis Priem. Malachowsky later described their dynamic perfectly. Curtis was the one who understood graphics. I turned out to be the build-it guy. Tell me what to do, what needs to be done, and I'll go figure out how to do it. That division of labor, right, the vision married with the execution, it was foundational for them.
And their collaboration at Sun, incredibly successful. Priem designed this monstrosity of a graphics accelerator, the GX. It featured 2 dedicated ASICs. Those are application-specific integrated circuits, basically specialized chips for one task. Specifically, the frame buffer controller, managing what you see on screen, and the transformation engine and cursor. These chips offloaded something like 80% of the CPU's workload. Handling high-res images, object motion, made the whole system run way faster. Priem even adapted his unfinished A10 Warthog flight simulator, called Aviator, into this best demo that Sun's sales team used to show off their workstation's graphics power. They even released it publicly in '91. So here you have these brilliant minds already pushing the boundaries of what was possible back then.
Totally. But despite those technical wins, Priem and Malachowsky got more and more frustrated with Sun's corporate culture. They saw a company that was, quote, more concerned with protecting success than driving for it, riddled with infighting. It was apparently easier to sabotage or get the other project killed than to come up with better technology. Malachowsky observed, for 2 years, nothing exited the building, just stagnation, the final straw. It came when Priem lost a key project, a new generation of graphics accelerators using Samsung video memory to a more CPU-focused approach favored by Sun co-founder Andy Bechtolsheim. Priem got chastised by the VP of graphics, and Malachowsky was just furious at how his friend was treated. That corporate inertia, that frustration, it became the catalyst for something entirely new.
Yeah, that sounds rough. A bitter pill to swallow for sure. But it sparked this new idea. Priem asked Malachowsky, why don't we just go build Samsung a demonstration chip? They were thinking, okay, we'll work as consultants, show off this new memory device. But Malachowsky quickly realized, wait, we need someone with business savvy to match our tech brilliance. That's when it clicked. We knew a guy. We reached out to Jensen. Jensen's response after they started hashing out a business strategy to work with Samsung was basically, why are we doing this for them? Why not for ourselves? And that led to the huge decision to shift focus away from the high-end workstation market toward the booming PC market. They wanted to make Priem's flight simulator accessible to all gamers. Their strategy, outsource manufacturing to keep costs down, focus intensely on chip design, a classic fabless model, really.
And so, late 1992, the legendary Denny's meetings began. Priem, Malachowsky, Jensen meeting frequently at this Denny's in San Jose. Malachowsky remembers they'd order one bottomless cup of coffee. and then, work for 4 hours. Priem talks about lots of pies, Grand Slam breakfast. Jensen thinks his usual was the Superbird sandwich. It was a humble start, right? But totally foundational for a company that would eventually be worth trillions. Speaks volumes about resourcefulness, those lean beginnings of so many successful startups.
Totally. The big leap of faith came in December 92. Priem, in this really bold move, just resigned from Sun and founded the venture alone. He later admitted it was kind of a way to guilt-trip Jensen and Malachowsky into joining him. Said, I put pressure on both of them that we can't let Curtis flail alone. Clever tactic. Malachowsky stayed at Sun just long enough to finish his last project. But get this, he made sure to upgrade and take his Sun workstations with him, maxed out the memory, disk drives, monitor size. Pretty ingenious move. Jensen, meanwhile, wanted to ensure a smooth exit from LSI. He distributed his projects carefully, then officially joined on his 30th birthday, February 17, 1993.
Finding the name, that was a journey in itself. Lots of rejected ideas. Primal Graphics was out because, well, it didn't fairly include Jensen's name. Other NV options like Invention or Environment, already taken or just stinky, as Priem put it. Finally, Priem looked up the Latin word for envy, Nvidia. They dropped the I, settled on Nvidia, partly to honor their first planned chip, the NV1, but also because they secretly hoped that someday Nvidia would be something that would be envied. Jensen paid lawyer James Gaither $200 for incorporation. The 3 co-founders each put in $200 for equal ownership. April 5th, 1993, Nvidia was officially born. Priem even got a custom Nvidia vanity license plate. A tiny investment for what turned out to be a truly envious outcome, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Just a remarkable vision from such humble beginnings. Okay, so companies formed. Next hurdle, getting initial funding. And this was tough. A difficult VC market, no revenue yet. But here's where Jensen's careful departure from LSI really paid off immediately. The former CEO at LSI, Wilfred Corrigan, he didn't just pitch the business idea. He pitched Jensen himself to Don Valentine of Sequoia Capital, called Valentine the best venture capitalist in the world. Garen. Valentine had invested in LSI before, had a strong relationship with Corrigan. So that personal connection was key.
Oh, absolutely crucial. Corrigan's endorsement of Jensen himself was the key. Nvidia's pitch to Sequoia. It involved demonstrating this hacked Sun GX card running a game called Zone 5 on a Gateway 2000 PC, viewed through an early VR headset. They didn't even have their own chip yet. But this proof of concept, it was powerful, showed the vision. Sequoia and Sutter Hill Ventures ended up investing $2 million, but not without a memorable warning from Valentine to Jensen. If you lose my money, I will kill you. Intense. This whole humbling experience, Jensen said, taught him a lasting lesson. Your reputation will precede you even if your business plan writing skills are inadequate. Really underscores how important personal connections and trust are in those early startup stages.
Navigating the early peril near-death experiences and cultural foundations.
Okay, so they've got $2 million in the bank. Nvidia can finally stop just, talking and actually start building. They moved out of Priem's townhouse into a real office in Sunnyvale. Apparently, a nearby bank got robbed several times, but hey, it gave them that crucial sense of legitimacy. The co-founders quickly set up their rules. Priem, as CTO, focused on chip architecture. Malachowsky leading engineering. Jensen handling the business side. This was really the start of their journey into actual product development.
In Priem's first design, the NV1, it was incredibly ambitious. He was aiming for high resolution, textures, fast rendering, all that good stuff. But he also had to invent a whole new texture rendering process just to deal with the high cost of memory chips back then. Managed to slash the memory needed for a card from like $200 for 4 MB down to just $50 for 1 MB. Huge cost saving. But then came the risky move. He decided to combine graphics and high-quality wavetable audio on the same card. Believed it would fix a market inefficiency, surpass the teeny sound of the market leader, Sound Blaster. This was a really bold bet, though, because it meant asking software makers to ditch a widely adopted standard for NVIDIA's new proprietary one. And as we'll see, that came with some pretty significant risks.
Right. While the ND1 design was taking shape, Jensen and Malachowsky were busy finalizing a manufacturing partnership with SGS Thomson in Europe. They apparently leveraged SGS Thomson's relative weakness to get this deal where the manufacturer actually paid NVIDIA $1 million a year for software and driver updates. That basically funded NVIDIA's entire software division. Smart move. Then in 1994, the NV1 gets unveiled at Comdex, big fanfare, and they secured this crucial partnership with Sega for their next chip, the NV2 console chip. Priem even made 6 trips to Japan to manage that collaboration. The whole company was expecting a runaway success for the NV1, officially announced in May 95. Sounds like everything was perfectly lined up, right?
It definitely seemed that way, yeah, on paper. But the reality, NV1 sales were, well, dismal. By spring 96, Diamond Multimedia, their main board partner, had returned nearly all of the 250,000 chips they'd ordered. Ouch. Jensen quickly realized they had, quote, over-designed the card, stuffing it with features no one cared about. The market, it turned out, just wanted the fastest graphics performance for the best games at a decent price. Simple as that. Combining video and audio. Big mistake. Made it harder to get contracts with PC manufacturers, too. Brutal lesson in market validation. Classic startup pitfall, really.
And to make things worse, Sega ultimately decided to drop the NV2 for their next console. They were worried about Nvidia's proprietary graphics rendering tech. But Jensen's foresight here was key. He'd included a clause in the contract. Sega had to pay $1 million if Nvidia produced a working prototype. They got that payment after a year of work by engineer Wayne Kogachi. And that $1 million was a key lifeline for the company. Still, Nvidia's financial situation was dire. To save cash, Jensen made the incredibly tough call to lay off most of the staff, shrank the company from over 100 people down to just 40. They pivoted, focused everything on the next chip, the NV3. Expert, how do these kinds of early near-death experiences actually shape a company's culture, its future resilience?
Oh, they're absolutely crucible moments. They either break a company completely, or they forge this incredibly resilient, super-focused culture. And that's exactly what happened at Nvidia. During this really turbulent time, this formidable new competitor emerges. 3DFX, founded by ex-Silicon Graphics guys. They launched Voodoo Graphics in '96. Their strategy, bring that SGI-level performance. You know, the kind you saw in Jurassic Park's dinosaurs, bring that to PCs, but at an affordable price. Their 3D Cube demo at a conference apparently kind of blew people away. 3DFX positioned themselves brilliantly as the only company offering SGI-level performance to personal computers at a fraction of the cost. Basically textbook positioning strategy, appealing to emotions. 3DFX was so confident Nvidia was going bankrupt, they were just waiting to pick up its talent and assets for a bargain. This wasn't just competition, it was a genuine existential threat.
Wow, so Nvidia's in this truly precarious spot, only $3 million left, just 9 months of cash. Survival meant creating the absolute fastest chip possible. They made a critical strategic shift then, abandoned their proprietary standards because Microsoft's Direct3D and OpenGL were gaining traction as the industry benchmarks. Smart move. Then Jensen made this controversial, but ultimately incredibly bold decision. He spent $1 million, a third of their remaining cash, on an ICOS chip emulation machine. That cut their runway down to just 6 months. His argument was basically, look, we're not going to find more money. We got to do it this way. This machine, it was slow, painstaking work, apparently. It took 15 minutes just to load Windows. Testers had to draw maps to navigate the screen. But crucially, it drastically sped up their testing cycle. Sounds like a desperate all-in gamble.
It was exactly that. A calculated gamble, though, born from that Street Fighter mentality Jensen had developed, right? Ingenuity was everything at this point. Priem, Malachowsky, and chip architect David Rosenthal cleverly reused parts of the failed NV1, added new features, and critically ensured 100% hardware support for the old VGA standard. That was essential. And incredibly, Jensen even managed to license a VGA core design from a competitor, Ytech. That move proved indispensable. Along with the contributions of chip designer Gopal, who Jensen credits, saying, if not for Gopal, we'd be out of business now. It just highlights how even in the absolute depths, strategic alliances and recognizing that indispensable talent can be total lifelines.
So the unveiling of the Rivia 128 in April '97 at the Computer Game Developers Conference must have been nail-biting. Chips arrived just days before. Engineers worked feverishly to get a demo running. Apparently it was tenuous, sometimes only running once without crashing. Yikes. But it worked, and the impact was immediate. Walt Donovan, the chief architect at a rival company, Rendition, was reportedly blown away by the Rivia 128's performance. He asked for a job right there on the spot. It's a pretty clear sign Nvidia was back, roaring back.
Absolutely, a moment of triumph.
Data.
With a working prototype, strong performance numbers, Jensen suddenly had leverage again. He raised more money from Sutter, Hill, and Sequoia. Soon after, the celebratory order came in from Gateway 2000. The Rivia 128 got stellar reviews. Tom's Hardware called it the fastest 3D chip for PCs currently available. Within 4 months, Nvidia shipped over 1 million units, captured a fifth of the PC graphics market, and, crucially, achieved their first profitable quarter in Q4 in '97, a $1.4 million profit. This turnaround, it wasn't just luck. It was a direct result of that intense, resilient culture Jensen had been building.
Yeah, and the Rivia 128 success, it wasn't just about survival anymore. It became this magnet for talent. Attracted chip designers like Caroline Landry, who saw Nvidia just take the industry by storm. Jensen's mantra was crystal clear. Extreme work habits were a necessary prerequisite for excellence. He apparently told a grumbling employee that people who train for the Olympics grumble about training early in the morning, too. Fair point, maybe. He tasked Michael Hurrah with giving new hires this very frank pep talk. We're ultra aggressive. If you came here thinking you can just hide in the back, collect your paycheck, and go home at 5, you're mistaken. This commitment to intensity, you'd argue that's foundational to their success.
It's absolutely foundational. NVIDIA's hiring philosophy became hire someone smarter than yourself, but coupled with an up-or-out approach. Hire quickly, but also fire fast if someone wasn't cutting it. Jensen insisted on working at the speed of light, constrained only by physics, he said, not by internal politics or bureaucracy. And this led to a critical competitive advantage. For the Rival 128, they actually reversed the usual process. Developed the software drivers before the prototype chip was even finished. That shaved nearly a year off the production timeline, Hal. That $1 million ICOS emulator they gambled on. This practice became standard, meant drivers were ready the moment chips started production. Plus, they provided centralized monthly updates for the best user experience. This whole speed-of-light approach became a core part of the Nvidia way.
The work ethic there sounds almost legendary, driven right from the top by Jensen. CFO Jeffrey Barr observed that Jensen was just so incredibly hardworking. No one is ever going to work harder than me, he'd declare, and that it was infectious. Marketing staff worked 60, 80-hour weeks, including Saturdays. People brought sleeping bags to the office, even their kids sometimes. Jensen's relentless drive was everywhere, from grilling an engineer at a urinal seriously to giving Ribor the first blast of his morning frustrations, paints a picture of intense, almost superhuman dedication.
It really does. And Jensen also famously used fear and anxiety as motivational tools, often declared at monthly meetings, we're 30 days from going out of business. This hyperbole, even when they were doing well, was designed purely to prevent complacency, keep everyone pushing to that absolute limits. A fantastic example of ingenuity during a crisis came with the next chip, the Reciva 128ZX. Chris Malachowsky, working late one night, discovered some spare capacity in the original chip silicon. Using focused ion beam technology, FIB, basically a way to precisely modify tiny chip circuits, he re-engineered it right there, on the fly, to add an 8-megabyte frame buffer. He apparently ran out shouting, I got it, we're gonna live. This saved the Nvidia series from becoming obsolete almost overnight. Just showed the power of deep technical know-how combined with sheer willpower.
Wow. Yet manufacturing issues just kept plaguing them, didn't they? Their first fab partner, SGS Thompson, just couldn't handle the huge demand for the Nvidia 128. They ended up in allocation mode, meaning they couldn't produce enough chips to fill orders. Nightmare scenario. Jensen, determined never to repeat that mistake, set out to find a totally reliable partner. He personally cold-called Morris Chang, the CEO of Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing company TSMC, back in 1996. Chang was apparently impressed by Jensen's personal approach, saw NVIDIA's growth potential, and eventually agreed to a partnership. This decision, looking back, it was incredibly prescient, wasn't it?
Well, absolutely game-changing, yeah. By February 98, TSMC became NVIDIA's main supplier, just in time for the Rival 128ZX launch, which they positioned as superior to Intel's new i740 chip. But then, bang, new crisis. Production issues with something called titanium stringers on the Rival 128ZX led to contaminated chips, resulted in a $9.7 million financial loss. Another near-death moment. Malachowsky again devised the solution, test every chip and run software on every part. This meant bringing in hundreds of blue coats, low-skilled contract laborers who actually outnumbered the engineers, just testing chips around the clock. Jensen's stance on this influx of workers, he sent a company-wide email, subject line, give a blue coat your pork chop, emphasizing gratitude, the importance of their help over minor inconveniences like maybe missing out on certain food perks, speaks volumes about respecting every level of contribution.
NVIDIA's financial state was dire, again, but their customer relationships were apparently rock solid by this point. Dell, Gateway, Micron, NEC, they actually got together and loaned NVIDIA $11 million. A crucial financial lifeline, and it further cemented those partnerships. Jensen's response to this near-death experience, paradoxical. He restructured the entire company to ship new designs even faster. He'd observed that no company ever held a permanent lead in the graphics industry, tasked Michael Hara with figuring out why. This led him to devise the famous 3 teams, 2 seasons strategy. Essentially, multiple teams working on parallel development cycles to just flood the market and accelerate product releases.
And Curtis Priem's earlier innovation, that virtualized objects architecture with a resource manager, basically a mini operating system for the graphics card that became NVIDIA's secret sauce. It allowed engineers to emulate hardware features in software, which meant they could take more risks, accelerate innovation faster. Michael Hara called it the most brilliant thing on the planet. This architecture enabled NVIDIA to always stay ahead, they could release maybe 3 times as many chips as competitors, effectively shooting behind the duck, as they say, just overwhelming rivals with new products. Jensen famously declared, "The number one feature of any product is the schedule." This culture of relentless execution, as former 3DSX engineers found out after Nvidia acquired their struggling rival, was simply down to hard work and intense execution on schedules. The lesson here for you listening: speed isn't just about iterating, it's a powerful strategic weapon.
Innovation and transformation defining the GPU era.
Okay, let's talk about how Nvidia really started to define an era through sheer innovation. Jensen Huang's favorite book, apparently, is Clayton Christensen's The Innovator's Dilemma. And he was dead set on avoiding that fate. He understood that while Nvidia built the Ferraris, the high-end chips with the absolute best performance, the real long-term threat would come from low-cost disruptors eating away at the bottom of the market. He actually said, "I don't want to let someone come in and be the price leaders, lock me out at the bottom, and climb their way to the top." He saw that danger clearly.
Exactly. So to counter this, Jensen studied Intel's strategy with their Pentium CPUs, something called speed binning. That's where components that maybe failed tests at the highest speeds were repurposed and sold as slightly slower, cheaper versions. Nvidia adapted this brilliantly into their shift the whole cow strategy. From a single high-end chip design, they'd create multiple products, maybe 4 or 5 different versions, hitting various price points. This did 2 things. It boosted their average selling prices, their ASPs, because they were selling more high-margin top chips. But it also let them capture market share at every single level, from the enthusiasts willing to pay top dollar down to the more budget-conscious gamers. So what does this all mean for you? It basically means that even the super high-tech world can learn a thing or two from a butcher's approach to efficiency. Maximizing value from every single part of your innovation. It's about leveraging everything you create.
Beyond just the tech specs, Jensen really got that marketing and branding were absolutely critical. While competitors were using these hypermasculine names like Voodoo Banshee or ATI Rage Pro, Nvidia initially aimed for this blend of tech excellence and emotional resonance. Like with technically meant twin texels, but also sounded like explosions, right? But in 1999, with the launch of the GeForce 256, they aimed for something much bigger. This chip was a huge leap forward. 4 graphics pipelines, an integrated hardware transform and lighting engine T&L that offloaded heavy lifting from the CPU, made graphics rendering way more efficient.
Yeah, the challenge was, how do you market something that technically complex? Their usual way of naming things, acronyms and numbers, just wasn't going to cut it for something this big. Dan Vivoli, their head of marketing, challenged his team. Said something like, "Look, we've got to charge a lot for this thing. We need to come up with a way to make sure everyone knows how great this thing is." This led to this really audacious internal debate, and it culminated in the decision to brand the GeForce 256 as the world's first GPU graphics processing unit, even though technically the engineers felt it wasn't quite fully programmable yet. That was a marketing masterstroke, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Just brilliant. Vivoli's boldness there was critical. He famously declared, "We don't need anyone's approval," and he deliberately chose not to trademark the term GPU. Why? To encourage the whole industry to adopt it, essentially creating an entirely new product category that Nvidia defined. This hyperbole, this marketing claim, eventually just became reality. It solidified Nvidia's market position, allowed them to command premium pricing. Then in 2001, the true GPU arrived, the GeForce 3. This one had fully programmable shader technology. It was a monster success. Quarterly revenue soared to $370 million. That's an 87% jump year over year. Nvidia hit a $1 billion annualized run rate faster than any other semiconductor company in history. Its stock price tripled, making it 20 times more valuable than at its IPO just a couple of years earlier. Just explosive growth.
And the company's focus on graphics at demos, that became a huge part of their sales pitch. A really pivotal moment actually involved Steve Jobs. Nvidia had wanted to use Pixar's famous Luxo Jr. character for a demo, but Pixar's John Lasseter said no. So, undeterred, Vivoli and Chris Diskin took a modified demo over to Jobs at Apple. Initially, Jobs was impressed by just the visual quality, how good it looked. But then Vivoli started clicking around, changing camera angles in real time, showing off the interactivity. That's what apparently blew away Jobs. And that demo led directly to the GeForce 3 becoming a premium option for Apple's Power Mac G4. Just proves the power of their real-time graphics and the importance of showing, not just telling.
And the wins just kept rolling in. Nvidia aggressively went after the Microsoft Xbox contract, even though Microsoft had initially signed a different company, Gigapixel. Nvidia had strong internal advocates at Microsoft, plus game developers apparently preferred Nvidia because it was easier to develop for. Long story short, Jensen and Diskin nailed the pitch, secured the deal, got a $200 million upfront payment from Microsoft just to cover R&D for the custom chip. That protected Nvidia from the fate that had just bankrupted Gigapixel. Shows their ability to pivot and just that relentless pursuit of big opportunities.
Yeah, but this period of intense growth, it also brought some internal strife. Co-founder Curtis Priem started clashing more often with the engineering staff. He was apparently unilaterally fixing architecture flaws, getting really possessive over his architecture. Jensen had to intervene, emphasize the communal culture, saying, "No, it's our architecture. You didn't do it. We did it." Ultimately, Priem, kind of recognizing his own skills weren't keeping up with the newer 3D graphics specialists, shifted his focus to defending intellectual property and patents. Jensen, reflecting on Priem's departure later, said, "Curtis is smart. He could have learned it," which really highlights Jensen's unwavering expectation of continuous learning and adaptation, even from the founders. A demanding, but probably crucial, part of that Nvidia way.
Okay, so here's where we see the seeds of something truly transformative being planted. General-purpose GPU computing. CUDA. As early as 2002, this researcher, Mark Harris at UNC, noticed scientists were essentially hacking GPUs like NVIDIA's GeForce 3 for stuff totally unrelated to graphics. They were reframing complex computations like matrix multiplication, basically tricking the graphics hardware into doing scientific calculations, finding totally new uses for all that processing power.
Right. David Kirk, NVIDIA's chief scientist at the time, explained it really well. He said something like, "We built a super powerful and super flexible giant computation engine to do graphics because graphics is hard." Makes sense. Researchers saw all that floating point horsepower and the ability to program it a little bit by hiding computation in some graphics algorithm. This hacking was brilliant, but super specialized. You needed deep knowledge of graphics shading languages to do it. NVIDIA recognized the huge potential here for accelerating scientific computation, so they made this immense and very costly investment to formalize it. That became CUD, a parallel computing platform, and the G80 chip designed with it in mind. They spent $475 million. That was a third of their entire R&D budget over 4 years. Just an incredibly risky, really forward-looking bet on this nascent idea.
And this massive investment, it hurt them in the short term. Gross margins fell. Nvidia stock plummeted 80% during the 2008 financial crisis. Ouch. Analysts were super skeptical, right? Focused on their short-term losses. At a lunch meeting, an analyst named Daniel Ernst apparently asked Jensen, basically, can a GPU really speed up something like Photoshop on a Mac? Jensen's eyes just lit up. He revealed they were already partnering with Adobe, explained how CUD-powered GPUs would offload tasks from the CPU, ushering in what he called the era of the GPU. It was this moment of profound clarity for him, right? Confirming his long-term vision even while facing intense short-term market pressure. He was seeing the future, when others were just looking at the current balance sheet.
And Jensen's vision for CUDA, it started with academic evangelism. David Kurt formalized university partnerships, gave away hardware, crucially, not cash, to avoid university overhead fees, encouraging researchers to use NVIDIA's GPUs instead of AMD's. But Kirk initially hit a wall, gave over 100 talks about CUDA with, quote, no takers, just couldn't get traction. The breakthrough finally came in 2007. Richard Blahud at the University of Illinois invited Kirk to co-teach a CUDA class with Professor Wenmei Hu. That class led to the first CUD Center of Excellence, a $1 million grant, and this really influential textbook, Programming Massively Parallel Processors, sold tens of thousands of copies, adopted by hundreds of schools worldwide. That academic groundwork, absolutely crucial.
And the impact on science itself was immediate and pretty profound. Take the example of this biochemist Ross Walker. He was frustrated by the academic catch-22 of getting time on supercomputers. You know, the famous scientist got priority, funding rates were incredibly low single digits, he said. Walker had this aha moment, realized that regular retail graphics chips were actually powerful enough for his Amber molecular dynamics software. Nvidia jumped in, provided technical resources. And that led to the 2009 release of GPU-enabled Amber. It ran 50 times faster than on traditional CPUs. 50 times.
Exactly. This breakthrough basically democratized computing power. Suddenly, poor scientists, as Walker put it, could do substantial research on affordable hardware. Like a $100 CPU and 4 $500 GeForce cards could rival a whole server rack. It completely transformed molecular dynamics research, breaking the stranglehold of that academic bureaucracy. And Nvidia moved fast, swiftly integrated AI software libraries into CD, making it super easy for developers to jump in. As Leo Tam of Amicus.ai said, switching away from CD now is a huge undertaking. Just not worth it. Another expert, Amir Salek, noted CD offered highly optimized and ready-to-use library components right out of the box. The conclusion became pretty clear. The moat is CD. That software ecosystem solidified NVIDIA's unassailable position, transforming them into a true general-purpose GPU company. For you, the listener, the lesson is powerful. Building that complete ecosystem around your core tech can create an almost impenetrable competitive advantage.
The Nvidia Way in action culture and AI ascension.
Jensen's management philosophy, it's maybe best summed up by his own phrase, tortured into greatness. Wow. He believes in really direct, often public feedback, especially in larger meetings. He actually said once, I give you feedback in front of everybody. You created the conditions because of some mistake you made. We should all learn from that opportunity. Brutally direct. Mike Rayfield, a former exec, famously admitted it was not the only ass-kicking he got from Jensen. Jensen would publicly reprimand him as an example of how not to run a business. That sounds incredibly intense. What's the logic behind such a public approach?
Well, it's really an extension of that whole pain and suffering philosophy we talked about earlier. Jensen's view isn't about giving up on people. He says, I'd rather torture them into greatness. He sees praise as a distraction, thinks past accomplishments are totally irrelevant when facing future threats. Dan Vivoli recalled asking Jensen, what could you have done better? Right after a successful launch. There was no attaboy, no congratulations. Jensen even applies this relentless standard to himself as a personal mantra. I look in the mirror every morning and say, you suck. This intense self-criticism, it sets the bar ridiculously high for everyone else. Creates this culture where continuous improvement is just paramount, even if it feels, well, harsh sometimes.
Jensen also deliberately rejects the traditional corporate pyramid structure, doesn't he? Favors a much flat organization, more like a computer stack or a short cylinder, as it's been described. He refuses to hire a chief operating officer, a COO, prefers to have over 60 direct reports himself, says it ensures he knows what's going on, and that information just travels incredibly quickly. Andy Keene, a former general manager, highlighted the contrast. Said at NVIDIA he talked to Jensen 2 to 3 times a week. Compare that to other companies where talking to an exec 2 levels up is often frowned upon. How does this flat structure actually impact decision-making and innovation day to day?
For Jensen, the idea is strategy is not words. Strategy is action. So it leads to this continuous planning cycle. There's no 5-year plan carved in stone. His mantra, the mission is the boss, empowers employees. Make decisions based on what's good for the customer, not based on internal politics or pleasing your boss. Every single project has a piloting command, a PIC, who reports directly to Jensen. Fosters extreme accountability. This flat structure means faster decisions. Arguments are based on merit, on data, not on rank. And Jensen apparently uses meetings as opportunities to develop junior employees by explaining his reasoning, his thought process. It's a structure fundamentally designed for maximum agility and accountability. Directly supports that speed of light principle we were discussing earlier. It all ties together.
Communication at NVIDIA is also pretty unique. Take the top 5 emails. Employees at every level send these daily emails detailing their top 5 tasks for the day, any market observations, key pain points, all tagged by topic. Jensen reads about 100 of these every single day. And on Sundays, apparently with a glass of Highland Park scotch, he dedicates longer sessions just reading through them, trying to detect weak signals that maybe his executive staff might miss. He actually said, I drink a scotch and I do emails. This system's led to swift actions, like adding engineers to the Rapids CUDA library after he noticed machine learning trends emerging from these emails. Employees even learned to send their top 5s late on Sunday nights, just to avoid disrupting Jensen's weekend or getting immediate questions. It's this really personalized, surprisingly low-tech way to keep a high-level pulse on the entire company.
Yeah, and that low-tech ethos, it extends to another core cultural practice, whiteboarding. It's just pervasive. From the company's earliest days right through to the design of their modern headquarters, which have wall-to-wall whiteboards everywhere. Jensen insists on specific markers, 12mm chisel tip markers, for visibility. He jokingly explained it once, saying, we have to use a whiteboard because I don't have a projector. But underlying that joke is this really profound principle. Whiteboarding forces rigor. It forces transparency, forces you to start from scratch. It exposes incomplete thoughts, faulty assumptions. Because as the saying goes there, at the whiteboard, there is no place to hide. This simple act forces clear thinking, collective problem solving in a way PowerPoints often don't.
The author of the source material we're looking at, he highlights what he calls the anti-Darwinian trap in corporate America. You know, where non-technical CEOs sometimes rise to the top despite lacking deep technical understanding. Thinks of people like Gerald Levin at AOL, Time Warner, Steve Ballmer at Microsoft, Bob Swan at Intel. Steve Jobs himself apparently had little respect for Ballmer, under whom Microsoft arguably missed the whole mobile computing sift. And Intel, under Bob Swan, pursued these uncoordinated AI strategies, closed down Nirvana, restarted with Habana, missed critical tech like EUV lithography, that's extreme ultraviolet lithography, essential for advanced chips. Current Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger still regrets the cancellation of their Larrabee GPU project years ago. So, expert, how did Nvidia manage to avoid this common trap?
Crucially, Nvidia avoided those pitfalls because Jensen Huang is an engineer and he is a computer scientist. That's according to early investor Tench Cox. This deep technical grasp at the very top allows Nvidia to make informed long-term technology bets that non-technical leaders often miss or misunderstand. They genuinely understand the nuances of the technology they're building. It's in their DNA. And Jensen's extreme work ethic, blurring the lines between work and personal life, he famously said, "Working is relaxing for me." It just further exemplifies his dedication. He even admitted in a 60 Minutes interview he has little sympathy for people who work less than he does. It's an incredibly demanding model, for sure, but ultimately arguably very effective for a deep tech company like Nvidia.
And this whole unique approach, right? Fueled by Jensen's technical background, that relentless drive, it's created something people now liken to the old Wintel dominance, the Microsoft Windows and Intel by '86 era. NVIDIA's CUD software plus their GPU hardware ecosystem, it creates this similar, seemingly unassailable competitive moat, especially in the world of AI. Corporations are building their AI models, their applications right on top of those CD software libraries, creates powerful lock-in. Jensen's vision, despite all the pressure from Wall Street for short-term profits, is just to continuously invest, even if it drags on the bottom line sometimes, because as he sees it, if you don't invest, you'll be out of business soon. He firmly believes that innovative engineering matters far more than financial metrics. So for you listening, the message is pretty clear. That long-term vision, that sustained investment in your core technology, even if it hurts short-term financials, can potentially create unparalleled, lasting dominance.
The AI, Big Bang, and future-proofing.
Yeah, and Jensen had been laying the groundwork for AI for a long, long time. Back in 2005, David Kirk started this 6-year courtship of Bill Dally. Dally was already a living legend in parallel computing. PhD from Caltech, had Richard Feynman on his committee. Doesn't get much more legendary than that. Dally eventually joined Nvidia as chief scientist in 2009. He was a master of parallel computing, the exact technique Nvidia's GPUs excel at. There was this great demo at Nvidia Envision '08 conference. The Mythbusters guys showed the difference between CPU and GPU processing vividly. A CPU-like robot took 30 seconds to paint a simple smiley face, working sequentially line by line. Then a GPU-like machine just splattered a perfect Mona Lisa in less than a tenth of a second, doing it all simultaneously, in parallel. It visually hammered home how GPUs were optimized for volume over complexity, perfect for parallel processing tasks.
Right. Dally quickly got NVIDIA's research teams refocused heavily on parallel computing, and that led directly to the pivotal cat photos breakthrough. Andrew Ng, who was at Stanford then collaborating with Google Brain, was training these early neural networks, used 10 million YouTube images trying to get the network to independently recognize cats, just cats. He was using 2,000 CPUs to do it. Dally saw this and realized the missing piece for deep learning wasn't just better algorithms or bigger datasets, it was hardware. He apparently said, "I bet GPUs would be much better at doing that." Brian Catanzaro's team then optimized Cedia specifically for this task. They managed to consolidate the work of those 2,000 CPUs onto just 12 NVIDIA GPUs. Dally called that the spark that ignited the AI revolution, a pivotal moment, showing the insane power of GPUs for a task previously thought to need massive server farms.
And this breakthrough, it got amplified almost immediately by the 2012 ImageNet Large-Scale Visual Recognition Challenge. Other teams were struggling just to break the 75% accuracy barrier in identifying images. Then along came Alex Krzyzewski, Ilya Sutskever, and the legendary Geoffrey Hinton. Their model, AlexNet, was trained on just 2 off-the-shelf consumer-grade NVIDIA GPUs. Took them only 2 weeks, and it achieved an astounding 85% accuracy, blew everything else away. That single moment forever associated the company with what is still considered one of the most important events in the history of artificial intelligence. It was just undeniable proof. Turned this fringe academic idea into a mainstream technological revolution almost overnight.
And NVIDIA moved incredibly fast to optimize its hardware specifically for AI. In 2016, Dally pushed for FP16 support on GPUs. He recognized that deep learning models didn't actually need the super precise but slower 32-bit or 64-bit math. They could get away with faster 16-bit floating point precision FP16. Big performance gain. Then, even though they were already late in the development cycle for the next-gen voltage GPUs, Jensen and Dali made this crucial call: incorporate AI-optimized hardware right into the chip. This led to the development of the Tensor Core, essentially a matrix multiple engine designed specifically for deep learning calculations. Made the voltage GPUs 3 times faster for AI training, shows incredible agility, foresight, even mid-development cycle.
Yeah, and Jensen realized early on that winning in AI wasn't just about having the absolute fastest chip. It was about the entire ecosystem, the hardware, the software, the networking, all working seamlessly together. Nvidia focused intensely on building a whole ecosystem of software early on, specifically to make deep learning efficient on their GPUs. This foresight meant that the AI pioneers, guys like Hinton, Fei-Fei Lai, and Andrew Ng, Ilya Sutskever, who'd used NVIDIA GPUs back in academia, they naturally continued to prefer them when they moved into commercial ventures at Google, Baidu, OpenAI, etc. That deeply integrated ecosystem, developed years before the boom, put NVIDIA in this practically unassailable position when AI exploded.
And then came the AI Big Bang. Late 2022, ChatGPT gets released. Its growth is just meteoric, ignites this massive AI boom. And Nvidia, they were uniquely positioned to capitalize like no other company. Although interestingly, just before the boom, data center revenue, which includes AI GPUs, was about 55% of Nvidia's sales in fiscal 23. But that was largely because the gaming market had declined. AI wasn't yet the massive driver of demand everyone thinks. Stage was set, but the scale of the explosion was still maybe unforeseen.
Right. But the earnings report on May 24th, 2023, that completely shocked Wall Street. Analysts like Bernstein's Stacy Rasgon called it the Big Bang, described NVIDIA's outlook as cosmological, predicted the largest dollar revenue upside in industry history. Just mind-blowing numbers. Trading algorithms apparently won out over human traders like Connors Manguino that day. NVIDIA's stock just spiked double digits after hours. The data center business soared by an incredible 427% year over year, hitting $22.6 billion in just Q1 of fiscal 24. An absolutely unprecedented revenue ramp for a hardware company of that size. This wasn't just growth. It was like a redefinition of what a hardware company could even achieve.
NVIDIA's CFO, Colette Kress, affirmed their commitment. Said they were moving heaven and earth to meet the insane demand. Their internal Tiger teams apparently embody that hard work and ruthless efficiency in manufacturing, adding quality controls really early in the process to reduce buffer times, secure that competitive advantage. This full-stack approach, expert, that seems to be a key differentiator, right?
It absolutely is, yeah. NVIDIA's full-stack model, hardware, software, networking, all integrated, it's often likened to Apple's approach. Differentiates them hugely from rivals who might only sell chips. This full-stack readiness, especially for the transformer architecture that underpins all this generative AI, it meant NVIDIA had already productized the features right into their chips that were perfectly aligned with what these huge, large language models needed. That allowed them to just outrun the competition, even against tech giants like Google and Amazon, who were trying to develop their own custom AI chips. They were just ready.
So the Nvidia way, when you boil it all down, it really seems to be, well, Jensen's way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
His unique blend of deep technological grasp, sharp business strategy, operational rigor, incredibly high standards, that famous bluntness, and just relentless speed.
That's exactly right. His catchphrase is, "The mission is the boss. Speed of light. How hard can it be?" They really distill his entire philosophy. Jensen's personal belief in the value of adversity, drawn from his own childhood experiences, and his just unwavering passion for the company. He says, "I love NVIDIA." Those have been the absolute driving forces behind this incredible transformation. From a gaming graphics company on the brink to the undisputed leader of the AI age, it's really a testament to the power of a deeply ingrained, leader-driven culture.
So after all that, what does this all mean for you listening? We've seen how NVIDIA, really under Jensen Huang's relentless, sometimes brutal leadership, transformed itself multiple times, pulled itself back from the brink of failure to lead the AI revolution. It's a story about embracing challenges, defining completely new markets, and building this culture that demands, frankly, superhuman effort, but also offers potentially unparalleled rewards.
Yeah, and if you connect this to the bigger picture, NVIDIA's journey really highlights that sustained innovation often means resisting the comfortable path. It means making audacious bets that other people think are just too risky. And it means having that willingness to, torture into greatness, not just the technology, but the people and the processes too. It's about this deep, enduring commitment to engineering excellence over maybe short-term financial metrics. And crucially, building that entire ecosystem around your core innovation. That seems key.
The really interesting question now, though, isn't just about how NVIDIA got to where it is today. It's maybe what happens next. What happens when a company that has so fiercely resisted complacency now faces the very real challenge of its own almost unbelievable success. How does the Nvidia way continue to evolve as the company itself becomes the incumbent, the giant that everyone else is now trying to disrupt? Something to think about. We really hope this deep dive into the Nvidia way has given you plenty to chew on. Join us next time on The Deep Dive, where we'll continue to unpack the stories behind the headlines.